Welcome back to Unslaved, everybody. Very happy to be here with you once again. It is January 27th, and Michael and I are here today to talk about a subject that I think is really, really important to discuss. It's something that I've been interested in myself since day one. It's actually one of the subjects that got me into your work, Michael, talking about the history of religion, of theology, of philosophy, all of these different things, and specifically the origins of priestcraft and religion. So people talk about religion, but here we want to get to the root of where these things come from and why they were created in the way that they are. And maybe we can get an analysis by looking in the past as to why things have gone the way they have in the present. So good to chat with you again, Michael. Hope you've been well. Let's get into this for our members here.
Thanks. Well, you remember that at the end of Female Illuminati, I mean, the presentation is based on the work of David Talbott and his colleagues. If you go to the first slide there, he wrote a book back in 1980, actually, right? Which is his first outing on the subject we're going to discuss. And that's 1980. There was no internet, certainly no YouTube or anything like that. So then when YouTube came along, he made a couple of self-financed, videos, right? Which we'll talk about to unpack it in a visual form, what he was talking about earlier, and self-made videos, and then selling them yourself, distributing yourself, even on the internet, there's problems with it. It's not always a success. So I don't really think these became viral. I've seen that when, in the early stages, like maybe 15 years ago, he was getting like maybe millions of hits or whatever, but that still doesn't really mean that it's going to take off. A lot of people think that just because you got millions of hits, it's going to become the next big thing. And often that's not true. And I think Talbot thought that it would. But the thing is that because it's very scientific, it's based in the plasma cosmology, and already plasma cosmology is taboo in regular science and physics anyway. It's based in Velikovsky's teachings. That's taboo, right? So really what happened with him is the videos are there. I'll put links below. They're still up, his organization, Project Thunderbolt, it's still around, and fans have written things. He's written things. Excerpts of the book have been around on the internet. That's, I think, where somebody sent me a link, 15 years ago or whatever, and I kept it. But the trouble was that the link that had been sent to me was written by some half. So I thought that the thing I was reading was of David Talbott. Actually it wasn't. It was just somebody trying, in the early days of the internet, right? It's very hard to tell. And I thought, if this is the way this fella writes, I'm not interested because it's god awful, right? So I just parked it. But then when we were doing Female Illuminati, and that was 2011, and it got presented, you were with me in Belfast when we did it live stream for almost 9 hours, 7 of which is the edited version. I brought Talbot's themes up then. I relocated that document. By this time he had a video, right? 2 videos actually. I'd watched those and I thought, okay, I definitely have to allude to that. So within the last hour, right? People scroll forward to the last hour Female Illuminati program. I talked very briefly about him because we were streaming live, remember? And it was coming to the end of the broadcast. Remember, and the boys upstairs, they were saying, "Oh, you're ready to go out of time any minute." And so I thought, well, if I'm going to go out of time, or we're going to have a glitch, which we actually didn't. The stream was absolutely perfect. Can you imagine, for 9 hours? So that was a real incredible, fortune that it didn't break down on us. But my thinking at the time was, if it's going to break down any minute, and they're going to go, "Oh, you're glitching," at least I'll have my information in. And somebody else's information, as good as I want it in, well, people can find that elsewhere. It's not as important as getting my thesis in the time allotted to us. So although I wanted to spend more time on Talbot's theory, I just mentally cut it, and I moved right back on to, the further part of the program just to get it in. And actually it worked out great. So actually since that time, I've never really done justice to this Talbot thesis. You see, so this, members, again, it's all thanks to you that everything you're seeing in the last lot of months is getting done, and more on the way. The good thing, though, the good thing I like about Talbott on the positive side is that he's respectful to Velikovsky. He in program 1, he's already within 10, 15 minutes citing Velikovsky, honoring the man as people should do. He shows a few book covers and he briefly deals with that, and that's great. All the more power to the man, for showing that his thesis, and even to an extent Cummins Beaumont. He doesn't mention Beaumont, but anytime you bring up Velikovsky, you have to bring up Beaumont, because Beaumont also wrote a book called The Mysterious Comet, talking about cataclysm. And so what you're hearing from this Talbott is the same thing. He's framing it in a cataclysm, and he's framing it in the origins of symbolism. He doesn't go as far as I do to start talking about the origins of priesthood, or chicanery of religion. That's where his feet get real cold, And in a minute, we'll actually talk about some of the weaknesses of the program, based on the age-old penchant of my work, which is exactly to do that, is to look at, if they're not errors particularly, but they're little X factors, little weaknesses. We'll get on this in a minute, But the positive side is he's endorsing catastrophism. He's endorsing some of the background reasons for it, right? At least why it exists as an idea. If he doesn't go so far, no, he does. What am I talking about? The plasma discharges, right, from the Great Conjunction that he talks about. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But the plasma discharges definitely correspond to a kind of cataclysmic event. Maybe not as devastating as your Velikovskyan cometary action, right? But devastating on the mind of people, and devastating on the planet itself, and of course devastating on the psychology, because the event that he says happened, I pick up, my thesis is, yeah, it was devastating, all right, in maybe ways that he doesn't want to touch while he gets back into the science, and program 2 is almost entirely about the science. So Thunderbolt of the Gods, program 2 is, to me, less satisfactory, but for people who are be into the science of it, plasma cosmology, go watch that. I'll put links below. But for me, I'm away. I just take a tangent off from that and follow through that it was devastating. It is cataclysmic because of what it did up here in mostly negative ways, right? But just giving the overview, it's clearly is a revisionist work, and I highly recommend it. If you go to the next slide, the actual facts pertaining are that there was a gigantic constellational alignment. Not constellation, a planetary alignment between 3 planets, and the sun was not involved. The big planet there, right, is Saturn. In the center, 2 planets come together, right? Venus and Mars, and the red one being in front, Mars. You can't see Venus because it's right behind it. And then as a shadow effect, they have the crescent. This is just, again, through the discharges. Now, the sun, our real sun, is illuminating this, right? Any planet that you see in the night sky, any star or planet constellation, is being illuminated by the sun. So the sun is certainly still involved, but Sol, S-O-L, our sun, is like the light, on the theater stage. But it's not directly involved further than that in the great alignment, or this great, we'll call it the Great Conjunction, right, from now on. And this was witnessed in the heavens. And, this is the thesis then of Talbott's work and his colleagues. Go to the next slide. And just to make it super clear, it's just that a multiplicity of images and symbols emanated from this. Here's the shell. So many times people have seen the symbol of the shell in corporations or in great art on doorways and architecture, right? So that would be one. And these were mesmerizing to people. Go to the next one. Yeah, look at this famous one of the bull's horns, which we see throughout Egyptian art. This would have been one of the slow. See, yeah, as Mars pulls away, because remember, this constellational alignment only existed temporarily. And Talbott does not say whether it was seconds, minutes, days, months. He's very, very ambiguous on that, right? So, but as the constellation broke up, as the conjunction broke up, other symbols came. So there were symbols as the planets came together, and people were watching the whole event. They didn't just see, oh, look at 3 planets have come together. In the days before this alignment, there was bizarre symbols and plasma discharge. There was an enormous discharge when the 3 aligned. That was the main event, the main extravaganza. And then as the planets separated, there was even more symbolism. And what's interesting about this is that all the symbolism of our religion dates from this, hence your introduction, right? That the origins of religion and priestcraft, we're going to unpack that today, come from this event. It's not to say it was the only event that pertained, but it was one of the biggest ones in history that did, and therefore folks need to know about it. That bull horn symbol, I mean, that is just humongous when it comes to bull symbolism. Bull symbolism being one of the major symbolisms that you find when you're really getting in, say, to the corporate aspect or even the occult aspect. This bull symbolism keeps coming up, and many are their interpretations of it, and many there should be, because you never interpret a set of symbols in one way. Never do that, even though you could probably locate it, to one or two events that inflated it or brought it out somewhat more, concretely or whatever. You go to the next slide. You see this famous symbol, which is the horned demon or the horned. See, again, the Egyptian symbolism, but this symbolism would have been like hair of an angel, right? So our demons, our angels also emanate from this extraordinary, plasma discharges. We could certainly never do do justice to all of the symbols that happened. If you bring up the web page, in the article that I'll link, I have listed, dozens of these symbols on heaven to earth. Yeah, there's a few examples. So we're not going to pause to deal with them all. And believe me, this is still a short list. It's taken years for me to assemble this. But since the members have made it possible for extremely important other subject matter for us to get done, and get off the shelf, it's left it open for me to then get into things I've had in my back pocket. It's almost like, you tie a knot in your handkerchief, 25 years ago, and then you're looking at it going, what the hell was that? I don't even remember. Well, I got loads of knots tied in handkerchiefs and forgot about them. But since we've been fortunate in the last 3 years, to get some of the most important subjects out of the way, those knots become important now, can be finally turned to and finally dealt with, like this one. Really important in their own way. And I've always had them bookmarked. If we had more time during the Female Illuminati, I would have probably done a lot of what we're doing now in that program, but just wasn't possible. But as you'll see from that list and from the article, we've got, see a symbol like David and Goliath, or Skull Hill, in the Bible, and the dove and the Holy Spirit, the tree of life, certainly. The idea of a falling sort of angel, which also could have come from commentary visualizations as well. But the idea of a bottomless pit, or 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I would say various androgynous figures, but certainly demons, elves, pixies, all sorts of bizarre symbolism, even, what Talbott thinks that even headdresses, the pointed headdress and all, crowns, he spends a lot of time talking about crowns. But the imagery that turns up in, say, Celtic and Norse and Arthurian lore, horned figures and all of that. It's not that they dated only from this event, but they certainly can't be dismissed. They were certainly central to this, because those plasma discharges, would look like snaky heads, and they'd look like crowns. And he goes into this. And believe me, you can take the New Testament, the Old Testament, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, Arthurian legend, the Book of Enoch, the Torah, with its Ezekiel, the Ezekiel's vision of the great winged and wheels in the sky, right? The story of the Leviathan. What else I list? Like Moses on his mountain. The prophets are always having dreams and visions, right? The 7 seals, the image of the New Jerusalem. Most of the Book of John, the Apocalypse, all of that can be related to this, which is extraordinary. And even Christianity has Constantine's vision, doesn't it? They say that Constantine converted because of his alleged vision in the sky, in the clouds of the Great Cross. You see, so.
Well, it's everywhere, isn't it? Like this idea in religion
everywhere.
of looking to the heavens. Like it's always about, Jesus is going to come back in the clouds. Jesus ascended to the clouds. Where everybody sees the face of the gods in the sky. When everybody thinks about heaven and where the gods are, they always look up. They always look up to the heavens.
Always, it becomes a common motif. Even the Native American tribes with their great spirit in the sky. The thunderbird, right? But think of Nazca lines in Southern America. Nobody can explain that. To this day, the Nazca lines are unexplained. What would even motivate somebody to do that? Well, here's the answer. Think of Masonry's bizarre symbols.